Okay, I just want to give you guys a basic overview of how to use your graphing calculator. So you all probably have a TI84 graphing calculator. Maybe it looks something like this, maybe not pink, maybe a little bit newer model, but it all works. So when you are given a set of data, quantitative data, numbers, there are two ways to enter the data and find the summary statistics. So I can go ahead and enter all of the data individually like this, or I can create a frequency table, which you would need to do if you're going to do a histogram by hand for sure. But putting it into your calculator, you could either enter all these into one list, or I'm also going to show you how to enter data from a frequency table. So we'll do it both ways. I pulled up my TI84 calculator on my computer, which you probably don't have, but you can just do this on your calculator in your hand and it works just great. So what you want to do is click on Stat and then click on Enter. And then you'll enter your data here into your list one. So first I'm just going to do it from a data set. So I have found that the easiest way to not make mistakes is to do the data entry vertically. Let's see, 5, 4, 3, 4, 1, 5, 3, 5, 4, 5. Okay, you always want to take a minute and make sure your list is correct, because I know that I should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26 entries here. And so if I look over here on my calculator, it shows me 27, and that's the line below my last entry. So that tells me I have 26 entries. And then it's a good idea just to go back up through your list and make sure that you have all the numbers entered correctly. Because of course, if you enter incorrect data, then all of your answers are garbage, right? So when I say I enter them vertically, you'll see I did 3, 2, then 0, 4, 5, 3, 5, 4, 1, 2, as opposed to going horizontally. Just with me, I tend to lose my place a little bit more that way if I go horizontally. So I've found that for most students, it works best to do it this way. So to get the summary statistics, click on Stat, go over to the right to Calc with your arrow key, and then hit Enter on one variable stats. And it will pull up what list you want. So we were using list 1, and so just hit Enter, Enter, Calculate. And then what this is giving me are my summary statistics for this data set. So I copied this over here to my document just so we can talk about it. And then on your calculator, if you just click on the arrow key, it will bring up the rest of the summary statistics that you would need, say, to create a box plot. Okay, so the parts of the output that we're interested in, let's see, we'll highlight it here. Not with blue. Okay, X bar, that's important. We need to know the mean. Okay, so X bar is the average, and that's the average of our data set. We're talking about quantitative data, so whatever it might be, height, number of trips to the ice cream store, how many times you ate a snack that day, all that. You can add all of these numbers up and divide by our total, and that's how we got our average. The other thing we're going to be interested in are these two numbers, which they are both standard deviations. So SX is the standard deviation of a sample set, and this other funny symbol is a sigma, and that is right here. This is a sigma, that's a Greek letter, S, and that would be used for the population standard deviation. So in this example, I'm just given a set of numbers. I have no context around it. So we would need to know if the data was taken from a sample, or if these are all the numbers that exist. Like this might be number of runs scored by a soccer team in an entire season for all their games. That would be a population. Whereas if we took a sample of 26 people and asked them, how many snacks did you have yesterday? This would be a sample. Then that would be determining which standard deviation measure we would use. The next item is important, which is the number of items in our list, which is n equals 26, so n right here. And then the rest is pretty straightforward. So we have the minimum value, that would be 0. And then we have the quartiles, Q1 equals 2. That would be the lower 25% of our data. Oops, right here, the minimum, Q1, median, Q3, maximum. So that should sound like it's pretty important because that's our 5-number summary. And so that is important. We need that information to create a box plot. So we will talk about how to do some of these graphs, but I also want to show you a different way to get that same data. So I'm going to hit second quit on the calculator just to start over here. And so if I wanted to start this list over, I would go ahead and go into edit. I can click on the up arrow and highlight list 1. Don't hit delete. It deletes the entire list. Like, it will not show up anymore as L1. So you don't want to do that. You just want to hit clear and then hit enter. And then that erases all the values from your list. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to enter these values over here in the list 1. So if you're given a frequency table, or if you've already created one, say I'm going to make a histogram or something, you can put your values in list 1, and then we put the frequency in list 2. Okay, so this time when I do my calculations, I'm going to hit stat, and then go over to calc, and do one variable stat again. That's all we're doing. But now where it says list 1, in my list, I want to use frequency is list 2. So I'm going to hit second and then 2, which brings up the little L2 above it in blue. And then hit enter, and then enter again to calculate. And then look, you can compare that the values here are exactly the same. So that's a really so much faster, easier way if you already have the values and the frequency to go ahead and enter your data. So just a couple more quick things here. You'll notice on the information that the calculator gives us with the summary statistics, we have the 5-number summary, but it does not give you the IQR. So you have to calculate that, which is pretty easy to do because they give you Q3 and Q2. So the IQR in this case would just be 5 minus 2 equals 3. So the IQR is 3. When I have my data entered, now if I want to go do my graphs on the calculator, first thing I have to do is turn my stat plot on, and that tells the graphing calculator that I want to graph statistical graphs. So you click on second y equals, notice again it says stat plot right above the y equals. Your calculator will default to everything off. And sometimes if you get an error message when you're trying to graph, it might mean that you have too many graphs turned on. So you can always check this. But so I want to click enter on number 1 and then select the type of graph that I want. So the first one is a scatter plot. That's 2 variable statistics. We'll do that a little bit later. The second line item here, and I'll just use my arrow key to go down. So use your arrow key and arrow over. That's a line graph. We don't use that very much, but it's an option. The third one, of course, is a histogram. We use that a ton. And then you have 2 box plots here. We want to use this one because it shows the outliers for you. This one does not show the outliers. It's just a box and whisker plot, and it just extends the whiskers all the way through the outliers with no regard for outliers. So we don't want to use that. This one on the right, it looks like a scatter plot, but it's really called a normal probability plot, and we'll get to that in Unit 2. So in this case, we're going to graph, let's graph a histogram first. So we'll graph that, and once I click on, once I click on that histogram, you have to hit enter. Once you select it, it will be highlighted. Notice that my Y list goes away because a histogram only has the X values. The frequency here, because I'm working now with a frequency table, I need to put list 2 in the frequency. Now, normally, if I had done this from the get-go, the way I started with just my whole list of data, I would leave the frequency blank here. But for now, I have a frequency list. I'm going to hit enter, and then I hit graph. And you'll graph it, and you'll say, wait a minute, there's nothing there. What happened? So in order to get the values to display, you want to hit zoom, and then see number 9 is zoom stat. So for statistical graphs, you can hit zoom 9 and hit enter. And where is it? Zoom 9. Enter. Did I not turn my stat plot on? Oh, I didn't turn it on. Okay, hit enter. Go back and make sure you hit enter on the on part. Otherwise, your graph won't show up. Okay, so now when I hit graph, and again, I can do zoom 9, and it will make it much prettier. So there's my histogram. So in this case, it probably has pretty expected values for the x-axis. You can click on window to check the values of your classes on your histogram. So in this case, if I want the y-axis line to actually show, I can hit, say maybe make that -1 for my minimum, and my maximum, my values go up to 5, so maybe I'll make my maximum 6. The x SCL, I'm going to make that 1 because I'm going up by increments of 1. And then the y minimum, it doesn't really matter. You kind of want it to be negative so it shows the x-axis. And then the y scale, that's just how high the bars are. So sometimes you'll need to adjust that to a much bigger number, but we're working with small frequencies over here. Our largest is 7, so that should fit on our graph. And that's it. So I can hit graph again, and it will change it slightly. But now you'll see, because I made the x minimum negative, you'll see the y-axis here. The other cool thing, just quickly, is you can hit trace and use your arrow keys, and it will follow along the histogram. So notice that this value, the value of 0, and it tells me n equals 3, that should match my frequency table over here. So the value is 0, the frequency is 3. If I use the arrow key to follow along the graph, it will adjust it. So here we go with the value of 4, and the count, or the n, is 6. So when the value is 4, n is 6. So that's another way you can double check yourself and make sure your graph looks right. Okay, so then I could change my settings and play with this, and we'll work with it a ton. But let's go ahead and do a box plot. So now I want to change my graph. Whoops. Use your right arrow key. I'm going to leave it on and hit enter, and then use my arrow keys to go down to the next graph over here. So hit enter on that box plot. And again, I have the frequency list in there, so I'll leave that. You can change your mark if you want to change what your outliers look like. And then we'll graph it. And here's my box plot. So I can hit zoom 9 if I want to make sure it all fits in there. Sometimes you might have outliers kind of straggling out to the left or to the right. And in this case, I don't have any outliers, but this is kind of a funny looking box plot because I have my 25th percentile. Again, I can hit trace, so I can start on the left value. Okay, so the minimum is 0. The box, the lower end of the box, marks the 25th percentile, or the first quartile, and we see that that's 2. The next line, that's the median, and so that's 3.5. And then the upper quartile is the other side of the box, which is 5, which is also our maximum. So that can happen. You can have a maximum and your third quartile be the same value. And when we look at box plots, we really can't tell very much about shape because it can hide the values in between. Here, we're not missing any values between 0 and 5. We wouldn't have any gaps, say, but a box plot would hide it if we did. So Okay, and just one more thing really quickly. So the other cool thing you want to know how to do is how to compare two sets of data on the same screen. So let's say we had another list of another table here, and maybe it's two baseball teams and we're trying to compare the total runs scored per game across a whole season. So this is a different list using the same values, or they could be slightly different values too. What I'm going to do is click on the calculator, go into my list again, and then enter, since my values were the same for list 1, I just used list 1 again, and then I put the frequencies from this table in list 3. And now when I go to my stat plot, I just want to turn on my second stat plot, and I can have comparative box plots show up on the same screen. So what I did was I went down to number 2, I click enter, I make sure and hit enter again to turn it on, and then click on your box plot. You could also use this feature to show two different graphs of the same data set. That would work too. If you wanted to show, say, a box plot and a histogram on the same screen, you could do that. But in this case, I'm comparing my list 1, which were my values, to list 3 as my frequency, because that's my second set of data's frequency. And then just hit enter and graph, and voila! Pretty cool. So that comes in handy a lot, and hope that these will be helpful in getting you guys started with graphing with your TI84 calculator. If not, there's a whole lot more information out there on the internet and on the TI site itself. So hope it helps.